Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my show. I really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe here outside Nancy Guthrie's house. It's now day 22, which is hard to believe. It is Sunday. A couple of interesting developments for you today. First of all, I just interviewed the lawyer for Carlos. You guys remember Carlos was the man who was detained. It's been a couple of weeks now in Rio Rico near the Mexico border when there was that SWAT raid at his house and the search warrant, and it was believed that he may be connected to the Nancy Guthrie case. And that didn't pan out. But I now got like all the details on what actually went down. I mean, he was kept in a car handcuffed for 6 to 7 hours, questioned extensively. A lot that I didn't know. I'm now learning about what went on behind the scenes and what they may have thought was connecting him back to the Nancy Guthrie case. So I'm going to have the full interview with his lawyer coming up in this episode, which was really interesting. Also, the volunteer search groups have been out today, and it's emotional. I mean, some of them. One woman got emotional talking to us, saying that she feels a connection to Nancy Guthrie, thinks of her own mom, and the terrain is rough out here. It's hot today. They were searching in tunnels, they were searching in canyons, and they actually found a backpack which didn't seemed to fit the description of the suspect's backpack, but still the sheriff's office came out and got it. So I talked to some of them. You're going to hear from them in this episode. I'm going to take you along on some of their searches. I didn't realize there's like these tunnels, these drainage tunnels out here, which we went into, which I'll show you. And then I'll have the latest update with the Pima County Sheriff's Office. The sheriff did an interview, and apparently there are some challenges, that's what they're calling them, with testing the DNA at the private lab in Florida. Not good news. He said it could take weeks, a month, and then he even said a year, which was sort of unsettling to hear Sheriff Nanos say that. So I'm going to get into all the latest details, day 22 in Arizona, this episode of Brian Enton Investigates. All right, hey guys, so there's kind of a lot to get to in this episode with the latest developments in the Nancy Guthrie disappearance. First of all, there were no formal updates from the Pima County Sheriff this weekend, but he did do an interview with NBC News. And I'm always kind of particularly interested when he talks to NBC because, of course, NBC is where Savannah Guthrie works. So I have kind of gotten the sense that they've gotten, not special treatment, but it seems like they're getting more one-on-one interviews. So anyway, he did an interview with NBC News, and he spoke specifically about the DNA. He said a couple of things with the DNA, but he said that I wrote some of that down on some of what he said. He said the lab says there are challenges with the DNA, and remember the lab that the sheriff's office here is using is a lab in Florida. There was some drama with the FBI initially because the FBI wanted to send certain items to Quantico. The sheriff decided to send everything to this lab in Florida because he said it was just better to have everything in one place, and this is the lab that they have a contract with and that they're used to using. And now he's saying that the lab says that there are challenges with the DNA. And what he said is some of it will resolve itself in a matter of weeks, months, or maybe a year, which I found to be kind of discouraging that he was said maybe a year or even months. But apparently I've also heard him use the word snags with the DNA. And he said that the DNA samples are mixed. That's the word he used, mixed, that they contain DNA from more than one person, and that is the reason that they are having these challenges. But again, when he said that it could maybe take a year, that just didn't sound good. Hopefully that's not actually the case. I texted Cece Moore, who is a DNA expert who I know, who I've interviewed on my show before, just to see what she thought. I said, hey, Cece, I'm not sure if you saw, but the sheriff did an interview and said there are challenges with the DNA. He said some of it will resolve itself in a matter of weeks, months, or maybe a year. The DNA samples are mixed. Do you think this is a big issue? And she wrote me back. I just texted her. She said, yes, it could be. If it was a straightforward mixture, it would not delay things much at all. So it sounds like it may not be a straightforward mixture. So that's not good news. I remember there's DNA that was found inside Nancy Guthrie's house, which I've always thought seemed like one of the most promising pieces of evidence because they said it's DNA that didn't connect back to Nancy Guthrie or anyone in her immediate circle. So now they're trying the genetic genealogy, which is where they try to test it, which apparently they're having issues, but they try to test the DNA in these genealogy databases to see if they can connect it back to anyone close to the suspect. So we'll see how that pans out. But again, that didn't sound like good news there, that they're having issues. He also said that there are no names that they're looking into right now, no specific names, no suspect names, which is a little contrary to some of my reporting, because you guys remember we went to the gun shops and they told us that they had a list, that the FBI showed up with a list of 40 names and 40 photos and was showing gun shop employees and the owner the 40 names and the 40 photos to see if any of those people had been inside the gun shop or bought a gun, or if they saw them at all. So I know they had some kind of list, but the sheriff is now saying that there are no names that they're looking into. He said, in terms of leads, I think that it is still growing. I think we are getting closer to identifying some of the items on top of the backpack, maybe the shoes, pants, shirt, jacket. Remember, the backpack is the only item in the suspect photos from Nancy's front door Google Nest camera. The backpack is the only item that they were able to fully identify and say for sure that the suspect bought at Walmart. And we know that FBI agents were working with Walmart to try and figure out who's bought a backpack like that in, the recent time frame, and they can actually go back through sales records and search back that way. So he says that now they are getting closer to identifying also the shoes, pants, shirt, and jacket, which would be big too, because then they could go into sales databases and also try to find where those items were purchased. And those may not have been purchased at Walmart, I'm told. The sheriff has actually said that. The backpack, they know, came from Walmart. The other items, they believe, were also sold at other retailers too, so it may take them more time to get to all of that. Also, and I really want to get to my interview with Carlos's lawyer here in a second, the guy who was detained in Rio Rico. But first, let me tell you about this volunteer search group that was out and about. So they all met up this morning early, 8 a.m., and they've been searching the area around Nancy Guthrie's home. The terrain is rough here. I mean, I don't know if I've sort of explained that enough, but there's a ton of cactuses. It's hot today. If you're in the shade like I am right now, it doesn't feel too bad, but right when you get in the sun today, it's hot. You get a sunburn really easily. And there's just a lot of like ravines and crevices and holes, and it's rough out here. So the search party, the volunteer search party met up and they started searching. We followed them. They went through tunnels. There's these drainage tunnels that they went through. They went all over the area. It was impressive. And at one point they found a backpack, which a lot of people were tweeting about. The backpack did not match the backpack that the suspect had in the photo, but nonetheless, they still called the sheriff's office. They knew not to touch anything. They were sort of like holding a stick to carry the backpack. And the sheriff's office came out and took the backpack. So we'll see if that pans out into anything. Keep in mind, there are a lot of homeless people in some of these areas, especially down in the tunnels. So some of these items probably belong to homeless people. I've kind of thought that all along. I thought the same thing with a lot of the black gloves that have been found. I just haven't put a lot of weight into a lot of that. But you never know, and every little bit helps. And one of the women that we spoke to who was searching talked about how she just felt this connection to Nancy Guthrie because, Nancy was around the same age as her mom. And I've heard that from a lot of people, and I felt that myself. I mean, some people think that this case has only been so, popular, I guess is the right word, or just people are so interested in this case because of Savannah Guthrie and the celebrity element. But I think it's also maybe equally because people relate to Nancy Guthrie. She just seems like everybody's mom or grandma. And, for those of us with parents who are getting older, you're always kind of worried about them and worried about people coming in the house and helpers, and just, you start to worry more. And for me, I think that's why I felt connected to this case. And I think that's why a lot of other people felt connected, including this one volunteer searcher who we met today. Take a look at this.
My mother died many years ago, and she would be around Nancy's age now. And if this was her, I would want people to do what they could to help me find my mom. You know what? I don't know. We can't change the past. We can only do what we can today. So the minute I heard that something had been organized, I was going to show up. So here we are. I didn't know him 3 hours ago, but we've teamed up on this. So, and I mean, I've spent majority of my life in Tucson, and you don't realize how vast it is in terms of not only distance, but the terrain. Like something can look flat and it's got this slight little incline. So it's not only distance, but elevation and all of the things.
So I've been away from home for a while for work, and one of the things I miss so much are my Factor meals. They make it so much easier to eat better, and Factor is a sponsor of today's video. Factor doesn't just ask you to meal prep because they've done the work for you, and it's real food. Factor's made by chefs and designed by dietitians, and it comes right to your door. You heat it for 2 minutes, and then boom, it is ready. That's literally it. There's lean proteins, there's fresh veggies, there's whole food ingredients, no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners. The chicken, the shrimp, the salmon, those are all my favorites. They're so good. I think you will also really like it too. There are 100 rotating meals every single week, and you can customize them like the new Muscle Pro collection for strength and recovery. So just head to factormeals.com/Entin50off and use code Entin50off to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for a whole year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. All right, guys, I want to introduce you to the sponsor of today's episode, Incogni. Identity theft, it is such a big problem. It actually just happened to my dad recently, and it was just awful for him. He had to close so many accounts. It took a long time to resolve. I mean, it literally took like months. And the truth is, we're all at risk. I've been alerted by several banks that I've used that there was a data breach and that my data is out there. And criminals, they can get a hold of your personal information for scams, for stalking, for harassment, and literally all sorts of other illegal activities. And that is where Incogni comes in. It is a personal data removal service, and it truly is so easy. Signing up online, it literally took me 1 minute, and look at this. My dashboard, it already shows hundreds of data brokers that Incogni has contacted to make sure that my data is not public. And they also have a new custom removal feature. It's on the unlimited and unlimited family plans. If you see a website and you spot your personal info, you literally just put it into Incogni's custom removal feature, and one of Incogni's privacy agents will take care of the rest for you. So to check it all out, go to incogni.com/BrianEntin and use code BrianEntin for 60% off. Incogni helps wipe yourself from the internet. They cannot harm you if they can't find you. Click the link below to claim your 60% off and get your personal data off the market. So we'll see if more of these volunteer search groups come together. It is kind of interesting that we're on day 22 now and that we're just sort of seeing this for the first time. I think that's partly because the sheriff has sort of emphasized from the beginning that, this was a crime, and that, we haven't seen big searches. I mean, it's just not something that we've seen as part of this investigation. Other cases I've covered, you'll see big grid searches that happen. You'll see helicopters up every single day. You'll see dogs constantly. We just haven't seen that in this case, which makes me wonder what they know behind the scenes that they're not telling us. Why haven't they had big search parties? And even with this volunteer search group, they almost in a sense discouraged it. The sheriff's office put out a statement saying, not to interfere with law enforcement, that you need permits to search in certain areas. They warned people about going on private property, which is all fair, but it's just made me wonder. The sheriff hasn't emphasized the need to search in a long time, which just makes me wonder what they may know behind the scenes. They may know nothing, but anyway, we'll see if these volunteer searchers come back out again, but they seem to cover, a lot of ground considering there weren't a ton of them today. Okay, let me get to Carlos now. You guys remember I raced out to Rio Rico. It's been a couple of weeks now when there was the first SWAT raid. There's been two. There was the one, gosh, I'm losing track of my days, but the one that was just 2 miles from here. That was the more recent one, which we still don't know all the details of. We know there were no arrests in that one, but the first one was in Rio Rico, which was that town right near the border where FBI and Pima County Sheriff's Office and the SWAT team, they were all out there. They pulled a man over named Carlos, who was with his wife and child, and they detained him. And I'm learning more details now. They detained him for 7 hours, 6 to 7 hours, his lawyer's telling me, while they interrogated him. And they seemed to have some information that they thought was connecting him back to the Nancy Guthrie case. Turns out it doesn't seem he was connected to the case. So I had a lot of questions about why Carlos? Why did they had a search warrant, they busted inside his house. They still have his phone, I learned. So I got some new information from his lawyer. He's now got a lawyer because wants his name cleared, which it hasn't officially been cleared. But I spoke with his lawyer. I wanted you guys to hear this conversation. So you represent Carlos?
Correct. And I also represent his in-laws, his family.
Okay. Yeah, we met them when we were out there the night of the the bust, I guess you could call it, or
Yeah.
whatever, the raid. So first of all, how is he doing? I mean, I've seen him do some interviews. He's maintained that he has nothing to do with anything to do with Nancy Guthrie, right?
Oh, he's an innocent man. He's absolutely an innocent man. It's really clear to me that he had nothing to do with it, and this was, some kind of mistake. And we'll have to get to the bottom of what the mistake was, who jumped the gun and why. But right now, Carlos, I think he's doing a little bit better. I think he's been able to see some of the response to his interview last week. And but it's been very hard on the family. It's been very hard on him. And to be thrown into the limelight, to have this kind of shadow cast on him, implying that he's somehow involved in the most notorious crime that anyone can think about right now. So
How did it go down? Because when we got there, they had his road closed off where he lives, and we heard it was a traffic stop down the street, but did they just pull him over? I don't know if you can share some detail on how it actually happened.
so my understanding is that Carlos noticed that he was being followed by a marked police vehicle from Marana, which is a community north of Tucson, um, and that he was driving back to the family house, sees this marked vehicle following him, and he stops to try to talk to them and find out, why are you following me? What's going on? When he does that, multiple police officers jump out, pointing guns, demanding that everybody get out of the vehicle. And from that point forward, they have Carlos arrested. They have him in the back of a Marana car, and then later a Pima County Sheriff's Office car. And then they conduct a raid on the family house.
Was he handcuffed?
Yes.
Okay. And did they say why initially?
No.
So he goes in the back of the car, and then what happened to him next?
So he was held in the back of that car for somewhere between 5 and 7 hours. And I should say in the back of two different cars. He was first in a Marana car and then moved to a Pima County Sheriff's Office car. And all of those law enforcement agencies in Southern Arizona, they work together often. They have various. Sorry, my ring light just fell.
No
Um,
problem.
they have various task force that they operate cooperatively, so it can sometimes be hard to tell who's running the show. Um, but he spent a total of somewhere between 5 and 7 hours in the back of police vehicles, fully handcuffed, separated from his family, and being questioned by um, Pima County personnel and most likely the FBI.
So they questioned him while he was in the car still.
Correct.
Okay. And then was he just let go after 7 hours in the car?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
wow, okay. And
And
so
yeah. The other thing I was going to say is they also questioned his family. They questioned his wife. They questioned his mother-in-law, and they arrested and detained, other members of his family.
and
So
so while he's in the car, what happened at the house?
what happened at the house is they did a forced entry into the house, breaking doors, holding, terrifying the occupants, terrifying Carlos's family, and damaging property.
Did they take anything?
Our understanding is that the only item that they took is Carlos's telephone, his cell phone.
And was he able to get that back?
No, not yet. We've contacted Pima County Sheriff's Office and requested it. We've also contacted the FBI and requested that it be returned. Obviously, we've also put in records requests and evidence preservation letters.
Do you know if it was because the second raid that we went to, the one closer to Nancy's house, was they confirmed was a federal search warrant. Was this also a federal search warrant? Do you know?
It was signed by a state judge. Now, that doesn't mean that when you say federal search warrant, what I interpret that to mean is what kind of judge issued it.
Right.
This one was issued by a state court judge, and it was directed to state law enforcement actors. That doesn't mean that federal agents were not involved in the affidavit that's used to get the search warrant. But the problem we have right now is we don't have the affidavit. And to kind of explain what that is, a search warrant is an order from a judge saying there's probable cause for a search and, describing what person, places, things can be searched. Under the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution, in order to get a search warrant, you need to put forward probable cause to a neutral magistrate and have that magistrate issue it. And that requires presenting some sort of evidence. The search warrant affidavit for this search warrant was issued by the Pima County Superior Court, and it is sealed. We sent an investigator to go and get it, and we're told that it was sealed. So one of our next steps will be to try to get that search warrant unsealed so that we can see what the purported basis for any of this was.
Do you have any idea? I mean, based on what they were asking Carlos, have you been able to sort of piece together why they thought he was involved?
I don't think they had any reason to think he was involved. My belief is that it's most like this is his arrest, his unlawful detention, the search of his residence, his property, the seizure of his property, probably all goes to some electronic evidence that's really dubious. Something like cell phone pings, something like flock cameras. He's a delivery driver. I don't know that he was ever even in that area. And I think it's widely known by law enforcement that things like cell phone pings are incredibly inaccurate. They're very dependent on a lot of factors. And so I suspect that it's probably some combination of that and possibly some other sort of bizarre government triangulation, maybe using some kind of, surveillance database type software like Palantir, something like that.
What
But
is
we'll
that?
find out.
What's that? I've never heard of that.
So Palantir is a software suite that's sold to the government that they use to cross-reference their own databases. So it's like intelligence gathering software. The military uses it, the FBI uses it, a lot of police agencies use it. And, it allows them to try to triangulate things. So they might be, I'm way out on a limb speculating right now, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if, they had some dubious cell phone ping, some really vague description of a vehicle, like a silver vehicle, and then they just cross-referenced it with Hispanic people who lived in Tucson or something like that. The other possibility is, some kind of tip, confidential informant type of thing, but, I don't see what that would be.
Right. When we met Josefina out there, I
Yeah.
guess, mother-in-law, she was saying how he was a delivery driver. And I was wondering if maybe he delivered something on that street. And maybe like they just went back and looked at all the cell phones that were in that area and then looked at the pictures and who might have had similar eyebrows, something like that,
That's certainly crossed my mind, but I don't know that he was ever even on that street, so I don't know. It's very strange to me to see just the kind of the circus the police created, where they clearly cast a shadow on his reputation and, through their actions, identifying him as a quote unquote person of interest, have really ruined his life right now, where he's having trouble maintaining employment. He was notified by his employer not to identify himself as being related to that employer. He's not getting work. And when he and his family go out into the community, and Rio Rico and Nogales are very small towns in Arizona, they feel like everybody's watching them, and people are. People are coming up to them, people are making statements to them, and Carlos's children are afraid to go to school because of this.
Yeah.
Um,
And then there
so
was the second raid at the other house where that there was no arrest there either.
yeah.
So we don't know if that's going to be a similar situation as Carlos, or I don't know if they're still investigating. It's kind of hard to sort out.
Well, I do know that with respect to the second raid, an attorney in Tucson named Christopher Shalepi has said that he represents that person as well as that person's mother and that they're innocent. They had nothing to do with this. But again, you get met with this deafening silence from the sheriff's office and the sheriff, who seem to be quite comfortable going out and placing suspicion on people, but have no interest in clearing them after that happens.
What does Carlos want now? I mean, he's obviously retained you. Is he want to sue, or sort of what's the next step?
So the first step is for Sheriff Nanos to come forward and admit that they messed up, that Carlos is innocent. They have no reason to believe that he has any connection to this or any other incident. That's step one. And every day that goes by where Sheriff Nanos doesn't do that, it makes it worse for Carlos. Um, the next steps after that are going to be an investigation that we will conduct to figure out exactly what the Pima County Sheriff's Office did and did wrong that led to that false arrest, false detention, and that illegal search. And then once we've completed that, our next step would be litigation if warranted.
I guess I always thought, and from other stories and cases I've covered, that when they do a search warrant where they bust inside and go through everything, that there's like real legitimate evidence
One
to be able to
hopes
do that.
there should be. That's what we hope. But again, this is a secret affidavit, and that's not particularly unusual. They often do secret probable cause affidavits. But what we do know is they searched the residence of an innocent man. And what we know about him leads us to believe that there's no way they could have possibly had a reason to actually believe he had anything to do with this case. And so, we all, I think, want to trust our government. We all want to trust the police officers who are, out there working to protect the community. But what we've seen again and again in high profile cases like this is that police will get frustrated with their inability to solve a crime, and they will end up making mistakes, leaping to judgment or rushing to judgment, and innocent people, innocent families get caught in the crossfire. And so we have examples like Stephen Hatfill in the anthrax letter case, who was falsely accused by the FBI, and Richard Jewell, the Atlanta Olympic bombing, falsely accused by the FBI, whose life was ruined. And so, when you have a high profile investigation like this, and they don't have good leads, what I think happens is pressure comes from above, like, hey, we got to move, we got to do something, we got to make an arrest, we got to show the community we're working on this. And when that pressure happens, we know mistakes get made.
And just to go back for 1 second, just in conclusion, when he was in the police car for 7 hours or a couple of cars and they were asking him questions, was it like a real interrogation, or do you think they realized pretty quickly that he wasn't involved? Like, do you know anything about what they were asking him?
But, my understanding is they were basically asking him questions about his whereabouts at various times. I don't. What one of the things that we anticipate getting is any video or recordings of that interview, and that might give us more information once we have that. We do think it's going to be difficult to get it, and so it may be some time before we know the details of that.
Yeah, with the FBI involved, and I just know from the work I do, it can be very difficult
Yeah.
getting those records once the feds are involved.
When they handcuffed him, placed him in the back of that car, made clear he was not free to leave, and held him for 5 to 7 hours in that fashion, I think it's just undisputable that that constitutes an arrest under the United States Constitution. My understanding is that at some point he was read his rights, but my understanding is that that was later on. It's also my understanding that he asked for an attorney and was not provided with one. So, I hope that answers the question. It can sometimes be hard to make the distinction between what constitutes a detention and what constitutes an arrest. But usually if it's a matter, almost always, if it's a matter of hours, that's going to end up being an arrest. And so my understanding is the only thing that hasn't been returned is Carlos's phone, of the things that were taken. What happened is, Carlos was living with his in-laws, and that is where they executed the search warrant. And the rest of the family was caught in the crossfire of what we view as an illegal detention and an illegal search. And, in those moments that evening and early into the morning, you can see the terror in her face, that she's been isolated from her family, that she's unable to figure out what's going on, and that police have entered her house and essentially kicked her out of it. I just think Americans of all political stripes should be horrified by this, because it is an abuse of government power, and for it to happen and then the government to remain silent, Sheriff Nanos to remain silent about its effects, when he could easily come forward and say, hey, we had information, we realized that information was bad, we realized that Carlos had no involvement in this. And that's really what we would expect a responsible leader in our community, a responsible sheriff, to come forward and say.
So that was attorney Jesse Showalter, who is representing Carlos. I'll stay in touch with him. You guys remember I interviewed his mother-in-law when the raid happened, and I was out there, and she was so convinced that he wasn't involved from the very beginning. And they had taken her cell phone too. And, I actually kind of believed her then, but I just thought to myself, well, there's probably a lot I don't know. I had just shown up out there. But she was convinced. She said he doesn't know Nancy Guthrie. He wasn't in Tucson the night she went missing. And it turns out, it seems she was right that he was not involved based on everything that we've heard. So I'll continue to dig into that. You heard the lawyer, Jesse, explain that they're trying to get the search warrant. I've also been trying to get the search warrant. A lot of that stuff is sealed. But once we can get those documents, it'll tell us exactly what authorities had to justify doing that search warrant, because the judge had to sign off on it. So sealed for now, but eventually hopefully it'll be unsealed, especially as they really move on onto different leads. Let me go through also, this was the latest update that we got from the Pima County Sheriff's Office. In terms of neighborhood activity, they say detectives and agents are back today in the Guthrie neighborhood canvassing as part of the investigation. And that no additional details will be provided, but we know they were out here yesterday. I told you guys how they've changed the traffic pattern on Nancy Street. They put a bunch of cones out and closed off one of the lanes. They say detectives and agents have collected multiple gloves from the area, and analysis is part of the investigation. Specific details about these pieces of evidence will not be shared publicly. It remains an active investigation. They're saying that there have been no changes to resources in the investigation. There was one report, I think it was from ABC, that said that, they may start to peel back resources as time goes on. And the sheriff is saying there have been no changes in resources. There may be fluctuations day to day based on investigative leads. Several hundred law enforcement personnel remain dedicated to the case. This will remain an active investigation until Nancy Guthrie is found or all leads are exhausted. DNA, they gave us an update, but really the latest update is what I told you at the beginning of this episode from the sheriff, that they're having challenges with the DNA, which isn't good news. There was some reporting about a helicopter over a landfill, and I was actually tracking it on one of the helicopter tracking apps, and you could see it doing a grid search over a landfill just about like 20 minutes from here. We went out to the landfill and were told there that, they didn't think it had anything to do with the Nancy Guthrie investigation, and now the sheriff's office confirmed the private aerial activity near a landfill was not related to the investigation. And then I already told you what they said about private search parties, basically saying that they appreciate the concern, but that this work is best left to the professionals, which really rubbed some people the wrong way, honestly. Some of the volunteer searchers, but also just some people in the community were like, why are they discouraging people from searching? The more, the better. So that was kind of an interesting statement that they made. So that's really the latest. Again, it's day 22. It's Sunday. I'm going to stay out here and just continue to investigate. I got a couple of things set up that I'm going to look into tomorrow. I appreciate all of you guys for following along. I appreciate all of your emails and direct messages. You guys have given me some really good ideas, and especially those people who live in Tucson have set me up with people to talk to, which has been really, really helpful. And I just hope that, I kind of say this every time, but I think about it every day. I hope Nancy's found soon. I hope she comes home safely. I hope there's some resolution in all of this. As I said earlier, I think we all feel connected to this case for one reason or another. I think of Savannah Guthrie. I'm interested to see, she hasn't made a video in a while. Is she gonna make another video? Is she gonna do interviews? Is she gonna do a press conference at some point? Because as I've shown you guys, I mean, some of the media is already leaving. So, that always makes me nervous, because when there's not a lot of attention on something, there's not a lot of pressure. The pressure goes away. It's not always a good thing for an investigation. So I'll keep you guys posted. Appreciate you guys for keeping up with all my videos, and I'll talk to you guys later.